Hey everybody, thanks so much for joining me today and joining Michael's. We are excited to be crafting some little Halloween treat bags. And we are making these little treat bags using foam. And so you can see they are a full little bag. And we're using foam sheets and then lots of fun details to turn it into either a Frankenstein bag or a little skeleton bag. We're going to go through all the steps to making both of them. So we're going to start with one. So if you are more excited about one than the other, just stay tuned. We're going to go through all the steps so you can watch and do both if you want, or just one. So I'm going to go through all of the supplies that you're going to need first, and then we'll get started. So first, you're going to need your template. So hopefully you've already printed out your templates. This one is for the Frankenstein bag, and this one's for the skull and skeleton bag. If you didn't print out templates and you didn't want to, you can definitely draw your own pieces as well. As you can see here, we've got our little like Frankenstein head. That's going to be your handle, Frankenstein little mouth, little eye shapes, all sorts of stuff. So you can draw your own elements if you want. Same with the skull and crossbones. But it's really easy if you have them printed out. We're going to cut them and trace them and use them as templates. And then we are using foam sheets. So I'm using my Creatology foam sheets in black and white, green. You can make your treat bag in any color that you want though. So if you want to make yours pink or blue, you can go right ahead and do that. And foam sheets work best for this craft because they are really easy to stitch. So you can see the border of our little treat bags here is all stitched together, and that's what holds the treats in there. And so that's going to be the best thing. You could do it with paper, but you're just going to want to be a little bit careful with stitching it because it could tear, where the treat bags tend to not do that, or the foam sheets tend not to tear. Then we are going to be using some yarn. So I've got orange or black yarn. You can again use any color that you might want. And that's going to be used for all of our stitching details along the border, as well as for this little bag here, we stitch the little bones on the treat bag as well. Then we are using all sorts of fun details so you can add as many as you want, whether you want to add fun little pom-poms. I've got sparkly ones and regular colorful ones, all from Creatology. And then I've got wiggly eyes in different sizes. You can pick any size eyes that you might want. And then I do have a little bit of Creatology glitter glue. That is for our little Frankenstein neck bolts. And again, totally optional. You don't have to do glitter. You could also paint that if you wanted to, or just leave them blank. And then lastly, it's going to be all your tools. So we're using scissors and a pencil or a pen, and we're using glue dots. You could use white craft glue. So I have my Creatology liquid glue. You could definitely use that as well. It's just going to take a little longer to dry. So just keep that in mind that if you're using liquid glue, you're going to want to wait a few moments till you really start using your bag to make sure that all of the foam sheets dry together. And then lastly, I do have a ruler here. It's sort of an optional thing. You can just like eyeball it and cut to make sure that it matches the size of your handles. But I am going to use a ruler as well. So if you want to use a ruler, you can grab that. And lastly, we are using a plastic sewing needle. So these are the little Creatology sewing needles. They pierce through the foam sheets really easily, but they are like a blunt tip, so they're also really safe to use. And I think that's everything you're going to need. So again, you can add as many other details as you want. So if you want to add fuzzy sticks or glitter or paint, you can use markers to draw details on it. You can get as creative as you want to. So I'm going to flip my camera around so you guys can see my hands, and we're going to get started. Okay, so as we get started here, feel free to put anything in the Q&A if you have questions on anything, if you want to share, if you're making something slightly different at home or different colors. We always love to hear what you're doing. So put that in the Q&A and we can help answer any questions you might have. So we are going to start by making our Frankenstein bag. Again, we're going to go through all the steps of making both, but we're going to make the Frankenstein bag complete first. So I'm going to start by getting my template for my Frankenstein, and we're going to cut all these pieces out. I like to sometimes cut all of these pieces away from the paper versus trying to cut out all the elements at one time. So kind of like cut the extra off as you go. Makes it easier to cut, and your paper, the extra paper kind of flapping off the back doesn't get in the way of your scissors. And so you can kind of see here on this template, this portion here is sort of Frankenstein's hair and his tall head. But we are going to cut the center portion out to make it the handle as well. And again, if you want to draw your own shapes instead, you can do that. Sort of like a little zigzagged edge at the bottom here to be a funny little hair line. And then it's just like a tall little rectangle that you can make into the handle portion. So to cut out this middle portion here, I'm going to just slightly bend my paper and then pinch a little hole in the center of that. You can see I just kind of bent my paper a little bit, and then with the tip of my scissors, just make a little cut right in the center, just enough that I can get my scissors in to that center portion, and then I can go ahead and start cutting around this line. So when you're finished cutting out this first template, this is how it should look, where you have this center portion cut out, and we've got this fun little triangle fringe. And we are making two sides of this. So with our treat bag, since it's two separate pieces that we're stitching together here, we're going to trace our templates twice. And so on your little printout sheet, most of them have a little 2 times if you're going to use 2, but for the little eyebrows, this eye shape, we're going to do 2 of each piece. So even though we only have one template, we're going to trace it multiple times. And we're going to continue cutting out all of our pieces here. That's going to be our little template for our mouth. And then just sort of like a little rounded rectangle here is the little tooth. And then the only other thing that we're going to draw together are the little neck bolts. So those were left off of our template here when we made that, but we are going to draw one on our little paper here. And So you can draw it directly onto your foam sheets, or if you want to add it to your templates here, then you can draw that. And you can see our little bolts are just sort of like a rectangle shape here, and then it goes out a little bit wider at the top. Sort of like a little like blocky T shape. So I'm going to draw two little lines here. And then I'm going to come out on both ends. Do a little rounded edge. And then connect those lines. And I'm going to draw these lines just a little bit longer because we want to make sure that when we attach our little neck bolts that it actually goes inside of the edge of the treat bag. And so even though you only see a portion of it, it's a little bit longer. It goes right inside the edge there. So we can do that again if you're drawing one at home with me. We're going to do long lines that are kind of parallel to each other. And then we're going to do a little line off of each top line going out to the sides. Little rounded edges. And then just draw a line at the top to connect those. And that's it. So we're going to cut that out and add that to our templates to trace. Okay, so now we have all of our pieces that we're going to trace for our Frankenstein face. And most of those we're tracing out on either black or white foam sheets here. And in person, a pencil shows up really well on the black. Sometimes it's a little bit harder on camera to see. And actually in person, even using a black pen on black foam, you can see it. As you can see here, that little line, it's hard on camera, but in person, you'll be able to trace it. So you can use either a marker or a pencil. I'm going to use a pencil on the black, so hopefully that shows up. Sometimes the metallic edge of the pencil shows up a little bit better on the black on camera. Okay, so we're going to trace our pieces here. And to do that, we're just going to lay our first piece. We're going to do our little Frankenstein handle. I'm going to hold it down and then with my pencil, just trace along the edges. And then I'm going to trace on the inside as well. So now you can kind of see that little pencil line there. And then we're going to do that twice. So I'm going to just move my little template down just below the first one I traced, and we're going to trace a second one. The perk of using a template in this sort of craft is that they're going to line up pretty much perfectly. And so you want to make sure that they're the same size. Sometimes if you just draw them on your own, it will not be exactly the same size. And when you're using something like this that is going to line up, you want that handle to line up directly at the same sizes. All right, so there you have our first two pieces there. And then we're going to cut out this long little shape here. This is going to be our little eyebrows. So I'm going to trace two of those. And I'm just holding it down with my finger in the middle and tracing around the edge of the paper. Sometimes if you get pencil or marker on your template, you don't have to worry about that. We're not actually using this in the craft. They're just a tool. And same with here, if you were to accidentally put your pencil or marker through the template, you can always turn, or through the actual foam sheet that you're drawing on, you can just turn it over. So we're only using, you only really see one side of it. So if you got marker on it as you're tracing it or smeared it, just flip it over once we cut it out and you won't even see that. Okay, and then the last thing on our black foam sheet we're gonna do is this little mouth shape. And we're just tracing one of these. Okay, so now we're going to trace the rest of our pieces and then we'll cut them all out at once. So now I'm going to switch to my white foam sheet and I'm going to take this shape here and we're going to trace this. And we're going to trace two of these. And then our little bolt shape that we drew, we're going to trace two of those. And then we just have this small little rectangle and we're just going to trace one of those. So now your foam sheets should look like this for the black one and just these little pieces for the white sheet. We're going to go ahead and cut all of these out. And I like to kind of cut all my pieces apart from each other and then cut along the line. And as you can see, I still have a tiny bit of pencil line along the edge of my little piece. But again, you can just turn that over when we glue it down and you'll never see it. If you are using a pencil like me as well, it is erasable. So even on the foam sheet, you can erase a pencil, which is nice. So you could always erase it if you wanted to. All right, so there's all of our little white foam sheet pieces cut out. And then we're going to cut out these ones from the black sheet. Okay, and then once you get to this point to cut out this portion in the middle, we're going to do the same thing we did for the template. We're just going to bend our foam a little bit, and then with the tip of your scissors, sort of create a little slit right in the center. And just enough that you can get your scissor through that, and then you can cut in and along that line. And I like to, when I'm using my scissors, no matter what material I'm using, I tend to try to get the material as far into my scissors as possible. So opening your scissors as wide as your hand can, and then putting the material all the way into the mouth of the scissor. And then instead of closing them entirely, right before I'm going to close the tip of my scissor, I open them up again and take like another bite with my scissors. And that helps create a smooth line versus sometimes when you cut right through with the end, that little tip of your scissor almost creates an extra little tear sometimes. And so instead of closing them entirely, start to, and then just open them up again right before they close all the way. Takes a little bit of practice, but if you just go slow as you cut and try to use all the way at the inside of your scissors, helps create really clean lines with any material. And again, we're gonna do the same thing. Fold this just a little bit in half and then cut a slit in the center. And then we can easily cut along the line to remove the center portion. There we have our two pieces here to make our little handle. We're just cutting out our last couple pieces here that we traced, and then we're going to move on to cutting out the square green sheet as the base of our treat bag. Okay, so now we've cut out all of our little pieces here and kind of set all these aside. It's all going to come in handy really quickly when we're ready to start assembling our little Frankenstein face. But our next step is taking our green sheet, or if you are doing a different color, that is totally fine, whatever color you want to make your Frankenstein face. So we're going to take our ruler now. And again, you can just cut, we're basically going to cut this sheet in half, but it's going to be about 6 inches is what we're going to do. And we want to make sure that our handle is going to be the same length or same width. So as you can see here, we want to make sure that we cut our treat bag no bigger than the handle that we made. Otherwise, it's going to stick out further and won't look like this is your Frankenstein head. And so if we take our ruler here, we can see that this is just over 6 inches. So we want to cut 6-inch rectangle. And if you don't have a ruler or are struggling to use the ruler, you can just take your handle that you already cut out, line it up at the top, make sure that you have a little bit of an overlap on the side here, and you can just draw a little line and cut down that side. So you can use that as your gauge of how wide you want your sheet to be as well. So if you're using the ruler though, like I am here as well, I marked from the edge where the little 0 line is to 6 and make a mark, and then move down a couple inches and do the same thing. So mark from the 0 edge to the 6 and make a little mark. And now I'm going to turn my ruler. I'm going to line up the edge of my ruler to those 2 lines I made. And then we can draw a line connecting all of that. And that's where we're going to cut. So you've got that cut in half now. And the good thing about using these foam sheets is that this is directly in half. So these are 12-inch ones. So you can layer them on top, and that's going to be your 2 pieces. But this is a little bit long now. As you can see our treat bag here, this is quite a bit longer. If you want to make yours longer, you can, but we're going to cut a couple inches off. And so I'm going to take my ruler now, and where this piece is here, I'm going to cut it down to our 6-inch mark. I'm sorry, our 7-inch mark instead. So you can see here, we've got our top of our little treat bag, and we're going to cut 2 inches off the end. So I'm going to do the same thing that we did. And from 0, I'm going to mark a 7. And I'm going to move my ruler down a couple inches, line up to my little 0 line here, and mark a dot at the 7. Turn my ruler and line it up against these 2 dots to make a nice straight line. And then we're going to cut along there. And then we're going to do the same thing with our second sheet. You can also overlap these pieces and then draw a line here, so you know exactly where to cut since we're making them the same size. Again, you can definitely make yours a little bit of a different size at home if you want to. The most important thing is that your handle that we've already cut out is just a little bit bigger, as you can see here, that it goes up, and then this handle is slightly wider than the actual green sheet, and that makes it look like that's actually his head or his hair. All right, so we've got our little treat bag cut out now. We've got 2 pieces, should have 2 squares here and 2 handles, plus all of our cute little details to make our little Frankenstein face. And we are going to stitch these together But before we do that, we're going to assemble the little face and we can add some cute details. Like here we have some little stitched elements on the front of our Frankenstein face. It's really hard once this is stitched together to get your needle back in there to do that. So we're going to make the cute little face here and then we'll stitch it all together afterward. So I'm going to take one sheet that's going to be my front and I'm going to use my glue dots now. And you can use any size glue dot that you want. Again, you can use liquid glue for this portion as well. It just sometimes takes a little longer to dry, but it does stick really well to foam. And so I'm not going to glue this on quite yet, my handle, because I want it to be easier to stitch and then we'll glue this on at the end. But I am going to lay this on top and just kind of set it there for now. So now I know where my hairline is going to be and I can attach all the things on my face without potentially going too high. And now my hairline will be covering up anything I've already glued down. And I'm just laying it on top and I'm making sure that my green doesn't show through the other side. So having the handle go almost down to the top of my green sheet, but not so far that you can start to see the green come through. So I'm just going to lay it right there on top. And then I'm going to add some little details like my little eye mark, my little eye shapes here. And I'm going to take a glue dot on the back. For some of these bigger pieces, I'll probably use like 2 glue dots per shape. And then just stick them directly onto the little face portion of our Frankenstein bag. And then taking my little eyebrows and if your glue dots are a little bit big, you can kind of just fold them back onto itself a little bit. Cutting out all these foam pieces makes the face three-dimensional, which is fun. But if you didn't have enough foam or if you wanted to make more treat bags, you could definitely just draw or paint faces on as well. On my little mouth here, I still have 2 little pieces. I have glue dots on both ends. I didn't put any in the middle. This is enough to hold it down, and then I can get my little tooth to go right underneath it a little bit to look like it's coming out of the tooth, out of the mouth. Now I have this little tooth shape here. Put one glue dot on the back. And then since I didn't add glue in the center here, I can just barely lift it up a little bit and just get the edge of this white little tooth to go underneath. And then it makes it look like it's coming out of his mouth. All right, next we're going to add some googly eyes. And I'm using the big ones, but again, you could use any size that you want to. You could also draw an eye if you want to. I think this little Frankenstein face starting to come together. He's got kind of a goofy little look. Okay, so again, this is just sitting on top, so I'm going to remove that for a second, but all of our face portion now is attached. And now we're going to add a couple of little stitch marks, little like scar marks, like he's been stitched up. And to do that, I'm going to take some black yarn. And you don't need a lot. I'm going to take just like a foot or two, cut that off. Got a little bit here. And now we're going to use our plastic needle. And I'm going to push the end of my yarn through the eye, or the little hole at the top of my plastic needle. And I'm going to tie a knot at the other end. I'm going to overlap my yarn, making a little circle, pull that tail underneath and through the hole, and then do that again on top so you have a little double knot. And then I'm going to cut that little tail off. And then we can stitch a little bit here to make some little scar marks on our Frankenstein face. And so I'm going to puncture from the back so that my knot is on the back. And if you aren't sure where you want it to be, you can do a little hole first. And then I'm going to go from the back through that hole. So now my knot's on the back. And then I'm going to just go about an inch or so over and puncture through my foam and pull that down. And now we're going to do little lines overlapping this longer one to make little like stitch lines. And so again, you can take your needle to know exactly where you want it. Sometimes it's hard from the back end to know where you want it to land. So take your needle and just do a little line at the, or a little hole where you want all your little stitches to be. So I've got 3 little holes here, but I didn't pull my yarn through. I just barely punctured it to make a hole. And now I can take my needle on the back end and pull through. And then you're going to go over, making another little hole. And now you've already have your holes where you want. So you're going to go from the back side through that next hole. Pull it tight. And then just go over your large piece that you already stitched and pull that down. And so you need a little bit of pressure, but the plastic needle goes right through the foam really easily, and it doesn't really tear it. Sometimes if you are having trouble, put your foam further down onto your table so you can like press it down and then like pull your foam up to meet it. And that can help a little bit as well. Okay, so there's our first little scar marks. We're gonna then on the back tie a knot. So I'm gonna take my needle and go through one of these little stitch marks, pull it all the way tight, and then go through again. And now I've got this loop here. I'm going to put my needle through that loop and pull it tight to make a little knot. And then I'm going to cut that off. And we're going to make a second little scar mark on his face. So we'll do all that again. So again, I've already got my needle on my threads, or my thread on my needle still. So I'm just going to tie a little knot on the end. And then you can pick and choose if you want to do multiple scar marks or little stitch marks, you can. I'm going to do another one down at the bottom here. So again, I'm going to do a little line or a little hole of where I know I want my little stitches to start. I'm going to take my needle through the back, through that hole, pull it till my knot hits the back, and then decide how long you want your little stitches to be and just poke a hole straight through. And now we're gonna do the same thing. I want to do 3 little lines here to look like little stitches. So I'm going to do 3 little holes. And then I'm going to go from the back, pull my needle through the first hole, and then cross over, making another hole. I'm going to tie off a knot on the back. I'm going to flip it over, take my needle, go underneath that stitch. We're going to go underneath again to where we have this little loop we've made. Take our needle through the loop and pull it tight. And then just cut off the extra. Okay, so that's all of the little details. We are going to add our little bolts, but we're going to do those at the end once it's stitched together. So now that we've got this all cute and Frankenstein-y, we're going to stitch it together. And we just practiced doing some fun stitching on the face of Frankenstein. So we're going to do the same thing, but with an orange yarn, and we're going to do little stitch marks all the way around the border. So I'm going to cut off a couple feet of yarn here. You can always get more if you need more. And we're going to do the same thing, thread our yarn into the eye of the needle, the little hole at the top, and pull that. I'm not pulling it all the way down, just a little bit so that it doesn't fall out of the hole in your needle. And then we're going to tie a knot on the other end. All right. And then we're going to line up our two squares. So we've got our two green squares here. We're going to line those up. And coming from the back, we're going to make a hole through both of them. I'm going to pull that all the way till my knot hits it. And then I'm just holding these two sheets together to keep them lined up. And I'm going to go down about 1/2 inch and go right back through both sheets. And then we're going to do the same thing on the back. Again, holding them still together so that you know that they're lined up along the edge. And I'm going to do this back and forth all the way around the border of your little Frankenstein. So as you're stitching, again, we're just holding this edges together, keeping it lined up. And I'm pulling fairly tight, but not so tight that I'm gonna worry about ripping my material. So you just want to give it a little snug pull to make sure that it is tight and that it's not gonna fall apart, or you've got like big loose stitches, but not so tight that you're gonna rip it out. And again, if you decided to make your little treat bag out of paper, which you definitely could have, this part sometimes will be harder to push the plastic needle through the paper. You could always do hole punches as well and then stitch throughout the hole punches. Okay. And now we're gonna do the same thing along the bottom here. Now we've stitched all down one side along the bottom, and now we're going to do the same thing, stitch all the way up to the top. And we're going to make sure that we leave the top portion here open. So we're not stitching. That's going to keep anything we put inside in there, but we'll be able to use it as a little bag. We're coming to the end here, our last couple stitches. I'm going to go right through the top again here, through both edges, and pull that out. And then we're going to tie a little knot on the back. And so to do that, I'm just going to kind of do a little loop. Pull your needle through that little loop and pull that yarn down all the way down to your foam sheet. I'll do that again here. So I've got my leftover string here. Just going to make a little loop by crossing over my yarn and then taking my needle through the loop and then just pulling that all the way down to meet the foam. And then cut that off. And now your little bag is sewn together, so you can easily put anything in there, candy or toys or little notes. And now we're going to attach our Frankenstein hair. So we're going to take our little glue dots again. I'm going to put glue dots along the hair, the little fringy triangle edge. I'm going to lay this on top. And I can flip this over and do the same thing with our second piece. And then I'm just going to, as I lay this on top, I'm just going to kind of line up at the top here to make sure that we're getting it pretty close to being exactly the same spot. So our handles line up and then press that down. And then by starting our stitching at the top and ending at the other end, but all at the top, this little hair handle completely covers that and you don't see the little knots either. And then our last step, we're going to insert our little neck bolts here. And again, you can either use a glue dot or a little bit of liquid glue. I'm going to take a little liquid glue for this portion and just a little bit along the edge here on both sides. And then right where I stitched, I'm just going to kind of shove this in to the little edge that is there on both ends, both sides. And that is looking so cute. Lastly, if you want to, I'm going to take a little bit of glitter glue here. And I'm just going to squeeze some out, and with the tip of my glitter glue bottle, I'm just gonna kind of spread my silver glitter all over the bolt. And I chose to do this last so that you can now set this aside. So if you use glue anywhere else, just wait until all this is dry and then your treat bag will be ready to use. With Halloween just a few days away, I'm sure you all are ready to collect some candy and some treats. And this is really a fun way to either collect candy or to give it out. So you can make some for all of your friends or family. And there you have your finished little Frankenstein treat bag. So again, now I'm just going to set this aside, let all of that glue dry, and you'll be good to go. Okay, so we've used a good chunk of our hour here making our first bag, but I think we can use a little bit extra time and go over some of our steps for the skeleton bag. Now that you've used all of these same steps, I think if you want to make more styles, whether it's a skeleton or something else, you know how to stitch your bag, how to measure out your treat bag, all of those details. But we'll go through cutting out our template and how to stitch our little bones together. And if you want to keep crafting with me, you might go over just a teeny bit of time here. Okay, so we're going to start our skeleton bag by cutting out all of our little templates again. And again, you can definitely draw your own if you want to. So I've got a little bone shape here. And for this skeleton bag, the bone shape is going to be what makes our handle. Cutting out our little skeleton head, our little skull shape. And then we've got our little sort of eye socket shape and our little skeleton mouth shape to cut out. And again, like I was saying, as you now know all these ways of making a little treat bag and learn how to stitch it and glue it together, you can get really creative. And maybe you want to make a pumpkin style one, or maybe a little one that matches your costume for Halloween if you're going to be a unicorn or a Spider-Man or whatever, maybe creepy, scary mask you're going to wear. You can still make a little cute treat bag to go with it. Okay, so for our skeleton here, so we don't have that many template pieces this go around. We're going to take our white foam sheet and your pencil or your marker, and we're going to trace two bones. Oh, I'm sorry, we're going to trace 4 bones. So for this, we're using 2 bones for each side of the handle. So that means we need to trace 4 total. There's our 4 little bones, and then we've got our little skull head. We're gonna trace that onto the white as well. And then on your black, if you might have a little extra scraps, like I do, cutting out all of our pieces from Frankenstein, we can trace our little skeleton face pieces onto just a scrap of black. Doing one of those little mouth shapes, and then we're going to cut out 2 of our little eye socket shapes. All right, I'm going to cut all of these out. And sometimes these little pieces like this can be a little bit harder to cut out. So again, just take your time and go slow. You could also do a stitched mouth if you wanted to instead, or you could draw on little face on your skeleton. All right, and then we'll cut out all of our pieces from our white foam next. We've got our little skeleton, our little skull. Cutting out, again, we're going to use all 4 of these bones to make our handles. We're going to stitch 2 together on both sides to make a little sort of crossbones at the top. Okay, and our 4th bone here, cut that out. All right, so now we've cut out all of our pieces from our template. So next we're going to move into cutting out the actual squares for the treat bag itself. So I'm going to set aside all of our little foam pieces we just cut out. And we're going to go ahead and cut out our 6 by 7 inch squares. So to do that, again, we're going to turn our paper long ways. And I'm going to mark from where I have my 0. And then I'm going to mark at the 6th line, a little dot, and then go down a couple inches and do the same thing. And now I'm going to line those up. And I know it's hard on the black paper or the black foam. Hopefully you saw it on the green was much easier to see with our markers. I'm going to do a line down the middle. And then we're going to cut straight down that line to cut this paper in half. And next, I'm going to turn this little rectangle long ways again so I can see this is the longest point. I'm going to line up my ruler, my little 0 mark, my little 0 mark in inches. I'm going to mark at the 7. And then do that further down as well. And then line those 2 dots up using my ruler and draw a line, and then I can cut that out. And now, just to make sure that I have 2 of the same size, I'm going to line up those 2 squares that we just cut out. And just kind of get my edges at the top lined up. And then draw a little line. And then you can line these up if you do have a little bit extra on one side or another. I'm just going to trim this down a little bit. Okay, so now we've got our 2 squares for the base of our treat bag, and we've cut out all of our extra little pieces. And so we're going to go ahead and stitch these together first. So for this one, since all of our little details on our skeleton bag are really just glued on the front, we can stitch them together first. Or we're going to stitch our handles on first, sorry, and then we can stitch them together. So what we'll do is take our first little back square and 2 of our bones. And we're going to lay these on top. And you can see here, you just want them to kind of lay to create a little triangle that you can actually use them as a handle. And the trick to this is that even though we are going to actually stitch them on and stitch them together, which will make them durable, we're also going to add a little glue dot to hold them in place. So I'm going to take a little glue dot on the back of my first little bone here, and where I want them to lay together, I'm just going to overlap them and hold them down. And then I'm going to do the same thing here. So on the inside portion of my little bone handles here, so here and here, I'm going to add a little glue dot. This helps make it a little bit more secure since we're just adding a couple stitches on. Plus, it holds it in place while you actually do the stitching. And I wanted to make sure that I use the glue dots on the inside portions rather than along this outer edge so that we can still stitch our 2 pieces together here and that the glue dots don't get in the way of that. So we're gonna do the same thing here on our second sheet. And you can kind of overlap them if you want to make sure that they're going to be roughly the same place. And then we'll add a glue dot. Hold them together. And this would work. You don't have to stitch it on if you don't want to, but I think that it adds some fun little details. And so from here, we're going to take some of our orange thread or yarn, and we're going to add some little cross stitches, making little like X-shaped stitches, holding these all together. I'm going to have like a foot or so of yarn here, push that through the eye of my needle again, and then we're going to make a little knot on the other end. And then we're going to create little X marks to connect these two bones, and then same thing here, holding the bones onto the actual little treat bag. So just like we did with our first treat bag, you can make your first hole through the front to give you an idea of where you want that to be, but then I'm going to stitch from the back so that my knot is on the back side. And then I'm going to make sure that my yarn's going to go over onto the second bone, make a little line, and then I want to make a little X. So I'm going to do a hole next to this one, come through the back, and then push through the top. And then we're going to tie that off on the back. So again, I have my yarn here. I'm going to make a little loop by crossing over my yarn and then taking my needle through that loop and then pulling all the way down to the foam. And then cutting off the extra. And then we're going to do that 2 more times on either end of the bone where it is attached to the treat bag. Again, I'm going to make a little hole at the front here of where I want it to go, but then I'm going to actually puncture from the back through that hole so that my knot's on the inside. And come down, making one little stitch. Mark my hole, come back through the back, and then again at the top. And then tie a knot off on the back. And now we're going to do our third and last stitch on our little X mark on this side, and then we can attach the second one. So there you have your handles attached to your actual little first portion of your treat bag. And we're going to do the same thing with the second one. I'm gonna grab a little extra yarn here. We're going to continue doing the same thing on the last two portions, and then both sides of our handles will be attached. And I guess I need to do another little knot, hold that one right through. So we're going to do a double knot on here. And then lastly, tie another knot on the back, and then all of our little handles are attached. There you have your little bone handles. And then we're going to take both sides of where our knots are. We're going to push those together. And now you can actually stitch that all the way around. So we're going to take some green yarn. Again, you can use any color yarn you might have or want to use. You could also use embroidery thread for this. If you don't have yarn, you could do embroidery thread. You could even use like a shoelace would work. So there's a lot of different options, which is fun to mix and match different material. All right, so we're gonna do just like we've been doing. We thread our needle with our yarn going through the eye of the needle. Then we're gonna tie a little double knot on the other end. Okay, now we stitched our handles on first on this one so that we knew where we needed everything to line up. But by not attaching them right along the edges, we can still line this up, and then right in between the bone little piece, you're just going to push through both sheets and pull. And then again, the bone handles kind of hide that little knot, so you won't even see that. And then just keep them lined up, and you're going to go ahead and every like half an inch or a little bit, just push through. All the way down the edge. You stitch all the way down, just holding our two pieces of foam together. And then once you get to one end, just kind of turn and start going along the bottom edge instead. Now I finished the bottom and we're gonna go right up the other end, this other side, and then that will make our treat bag nice and secure. And then as you get to the top here, again, you can kind of just pull the little bones aside. Right through the top. And then we're going to tie a knot or a little double knot right at the top here to make sure that all of our stitching doesn't fall apart. And then cut that off. And again, that little bone handle kind of hides the knots there. And there you've got your handles and your treat bag all stitched together. And lastly, you're just going to glue all of your pieces on. You can use glue or glue dots. And for our little sample one, we had like lots of little pom-poms all attached to it. So you could do fun details like that, or you could use more glitter glue. So I put my little skeleton or little skull right in the middle. And then my little eye socket shapes here, sort of like little ovals, and having the smaller side toward the top. Add on lastly our little mouth shape. And then I think we'll stick on a couple little googly eyes. I'm going to use a little glue since these are smaller. A little wiggle eye always makes them just feel a little bit goofy, a little bit funny, and that makes them a fun little craft. And then same thing, you can continue to add pom-poms using glue dots. Got sparkly ones here. You can add different colors. I'm just sticking one glue dot per pom-pom.
Rosie asked if we could use glue instead of lighting, sorry.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. If you wanted to use glue instead of the stitching, you could definitely do that. That wouldn't be a problem. It will just, again, take a little bit longer to dry, or you could do glue dots all along the edges and you could stick it together instead of doing the actual stitching. All right, again, just adding on some color and little pom-poms. You can mix and match colors, or again, you could do little pieces of like Chanel stems or pipe cleaners instead if you wanted to. And there you have your little skeleton bag all ready to go. And just like that, you guys have made multiple little treat bags with me today. I hope that you had so much fun. I definitely did. And you can now gift these and fill them full of goodies or collect treats on Halloween with them. And I hope that you enjoyed crafting with me and Michael's, and I look forward to seeing you guys soon. Thanks so much.